Now, it's been a while, but I thought it was time I did another comparison video, especially in light of Indian's recent Indian Scout release. Now, I'm very much taken by Indian's new Scout 101, and I started to think, if I was going to buy an Indian Scout 101, what other bike would I consider in that category? And the first bike that came to mind was Harley's Sportster S. Now, I've test ridden the Sportster S, and I have a video on the Sportster S test ride on my channel, and I was really taken by that bike, and I'm a fan. I have to say I'm a fan of the Sportster S. And I started to think, looking at the figures of the 101 Scout versus the Sportster S, which is the better bike? Now, the 101 is currently Flavour of the Month on YouTube, but I'm thinking not so fast. Let's look at the two bikes, break them down, look at the figures, and try and pick which is the best bike of the two. And after we've done that, I'm going to tell you which bike I would buy and why. Okay, let's get straight into it. The engine capacity for both bikes is pretty much identical. You've got 1250cc's for the Indian Scout 101 and 1252cc's for the Harley Sportster S. Horsepower is where we see a difference. You've got 111 horsepower for the Scout 101, 119 horsepower for the Sportster S. Now, Harley does quote a figure for the peak horsepower for the Sportster S coming in at 7,500 RPM. Interestingly, Indian doesn't quote a horsepower peak RPM figure, but we may be able to guess what that might be by looking at the torque figures. Indian quote 80 foot-pound of torque at 6,300 RPM for the 101. Harley quote 93 foot-pound of torque at 6,000 RPM for the Sportster S. So those peak torque figures are coming in at around about the same rev range, around about 6,000 RPM, 6.3 for the 101 and 6,000 for the Sportster S, which leads me to believe that the peak horsepower figure will also be around about 7,500 RPM, I believe, for the Indian Scout. Now, when we look at wet weight, you've got 249 kilograms or 549 pounds for the Indian Scout and 228 kilograms or 502 pounds for the Sportster S. So the Sportster S has more horsepower, more torque, and is lighter in weight. And if we look at the power to weight figures, the Indian Scout comes in at 0.202 and the Sportster S comes in at 0.237. If you put both these bikes on a drag strip with a similar weight rider, with similar riding skills, the Sportster S will beat the Indian Scout 101 on a drag strip, quarter mile, no problems at all. And with its superior torque to weight figure, I'm predicting the Sportster S will also get the jump on the Indian Scout 101 off the start line. So if outright power is all important to you, then the Sportster S is the one you should be looking at. Now, comparing the wheelbases, the Indian Scout 101 measures 1562mm and the Sportster S measures 1520mm. So the Sportster S has a shorter wheelbase than the Scout 101. Typically, a shorter wheelbase means more responsive turning and quicker steering. But when we compare the rake angle of the two bikes, the Sportster S measures at 30 degrees and the Indian Scout 101 comes in at 29 degrees. So where the Sportster S had the advantage in a shorter wheelbase, the Indian Scout has an advantage in a sharper or a steeper rake. Now, for suspension, Harley quote a 43mm inverted fork for the front with compression, preload and rebound adjustment. And for the rear, it's a single monoshock with also compression and preload adjustment. And the preload's adjusted by a handy remote dial. Now, for the 101, I can't find any specs on the size of the forks, but you do get inverted forks and you do get adjustment, but I can't tell whether you get compression, preload and rebound on the front of the Scout 101. I would expect you do, but looking from the pictures, I can't pick that up. And the other difference with the suspension is the Indian Scout 101 has twin rear shocks where the Sportster S has a single monoshock. Now, after riding the Sportster S, it does give you a firm ride. There's no doubt about it, but it does handle very well. And on my test ride, I didn't find the firm ride to be too much of a problem. That may change if you own the bike over a longer period, but for the ride I had, I didn't have a problem with it. Now, just on suspension travel and comfort, the Indian Scout has 120mm of travel in the front forks, whereas the Sportster S has only 92mm of travel in the front forks. And for the rear shocks, the Sportster S has 51mm of travel and the Indian Scout 101 has 76mm of travel. So you're looking at 2 inches of rear travel on the rear of the Harley Sportster S, 3 inches of travel on the rear of the Scout 101, And then for the front forks, the Harley Sportster S is approaching 4 inches and the Indian Scout 101 is approaching 5 inches of travel. For ride comfort, I would comfortably say that the Indian Scout 101 will have a more comfortable ride than the Sportster S. Now, when it comes to electronics, ABS is fitted standard across both bikes, especially here in Australia. You get cruise control on both bikes. Ride modes are available depending on what trim level you get on particularly the Indian Scout 101. Some trim levels will have rider modes, some will not. You have the option of standard trim, limited trim, or limited plus tech trim. With the standard trim, you get ABS brakes, LED lighting, and you only get the analog gauge. With limited trim, you get traction and cruise control, you get a USB charger, and you get the 3 ride modes. So you'd need to get the limited trim before you get the ride modes on the Indian Scout. The third trim level is limited plus tech trim. And with that trim level, you get keyless ignition, you get the 4-inch display powered by Ride Command. And I'm trying to think back from memory. I'm pretty sure the Sportster S has the power modes as well. Now, in terms of electronics, this is where the Sportster S, I think, has a better featured electronics package than the Indian Scout 101. Because with the Sportster S, you get traction control, which the Scout 101 has, but you also get drag, torque, slip control, you get tyre pressure monitoring, you get wheel lift mitigation. So if you go to pull a wheelie, it's going to hold the front wheel down. You get cornering ABS over and above the standard ABS. You get cornering traction. You get cornering drag slip control. And you get an enhanced wheel lift mitigation control. So the Sportster S is going to sort of monitor your riding, especially in cornering and when leaning the bike over. And it will apply different levels of ABS or traction control depending on your lean angle of your bike. Now, the Scout 101 won't do that. You'll only have the basic ABS and basic traction control. So that's a bit of a win to the Sportster S right there. Now, when it comes to ground clearance, you get 113 millimeters of ground clearance for the Scout 101 and 90 millimeters of ground clearance for the Sportster S. So that's almost an inch more ground clearance on the Scout 101. The overall length of the bikes is very similar with 2,206 millimeters for the Scout 101 and 2,270 millimeters for the Sportster S. So we're talking almost a 3-inch difference between the two bikes, with the Sportster S being almost 3 inches longer. Lean angle for both bikes is very similar. You do have more lean angle on the Sportster S at 34 degrees versus 33 degrees on the Indian Scout. When it comes to fuel economy, Harley quote 5.1 litres per 100 kilometres for the Sportster S, and Indian aren't quoting any fuel economy figures yet for the new 2025 Scout lineup. Fuel capacity, you have a larger tank on the Scout range at 13 litres versus 11.8 litres for the Sportster S. Now, when it comes to seat height, shorter riders are going to appreciate the Scout more at 680 millimeters for the seat height, and taller riders will probably appreciate the Sportster S more at 765 millimeters for the seat height. Now, wheel sizes and tyre sizes, the Scout has a 19-inch front wheel and a 16-inch rear wheel. The Sportster S has a 17-inch front wheel and a 16-inch rear wheel. Now, the tyre widths is interesting. The Indian Scout 101 has a 130mm wide tyre on the front and a 150mm wide tyre on the rear, whereas the Sportster S has a 160mm wide tyre on the front and a 180mm wide tyre on the rear. The Sportster S's rear tyre is certainly going to fill out that guard more, and it's going to look pretty cool. It does look pretty cool in the flesh. But as for steering and handling, I expect the Indian Scout to be a sharper turner, if you like. It should go from side to side through the twisties quicker and get over quicker than the Sportster S with its wider tyres. Now, where the Sportster S comes standard with the 4-inch display with navigation, although via an app, you only get navigation through the app on the 4-inch display. The 4-inch display on the Indian is an optional extra if you go for the Limited Plus Tech package. Now we come to pricing, and this is where we can see where Indian are targeting this bike, the 101, because it starts at $16,999 US versus Harley's Sportster S also starting at $16,999 US dollars. Now, there's no pricing for Australia yet, but I do expect or feel that the 101 will be priced very similarly to the Sportster S in Australia. At least that's my expectation. Now, I don't know if the 101 comes standard with the Limited Plus Tech or whether that's an optional extra. So now, if that's the case that the Limited Plus Tech package is an optional extra on the Scout 101, expect to see it be more expensive than the Harley Sportster S in the US. Well, that's the specs out of the way. What are my thoughts? Which bike would I go for? This is an interesting question because it's not, for me personally, it's not a clear one bike is the winner. As you know, I'm a big fan of Indian motorcycles and, I love my Indian and I'd buy another one in a heartbeat. And the Scout 101 is a very attractive bike to me. But then so is the Sportster S. I haven't ridden the Scout 101, obviously, because it won't be here in Australia for months. But I have ridden the Sportster S, and I really did like that bike. But if you drop it down a few gears, then now we're at 3,500, and it just leaps. Plus, I think the Sportster S is certainly going to be more engaging to ride performance-wise in terms of acceleration. In terms of handling, it's going to be very similar because the Sportster S is a lighter bike. The Scout 101's heavier, but then with its narrower tyres, I think it will feel perhaps a little bit more agile than the Sportster S. I won't know till I get a test ride, and as soon as they're available here in Australia, in the country, at my local dealer, they've assured me I'll get a test ride, so I'm very much looking forward to that. But here in Australia, I'm not expecting to see it for months, to be honest. And the other elephant in the room that we need to consider is going to be reliability. I'm still seeing concerns about Harley's Revolution engine, even in 2023 models, and even a comment on the video I made about the Scouts from one of my viewers was quite interesting. And I'll read that to you here. Eric writes, I bought a new Sportster S at the beginning of 2023 after test riding some Indians. Besides the short rear suspension travel, I really like the Scout. Well, the 2024 Scout and the Sportster S both have 2 inches of rear suspension travel. So, yeah, it's interesting that he felt that the Scout had less travel than the Sportster S. Maybe it must be from ride and feel. Eric goes on to say, but it didn't feel like it was worth the price considering the price difference to the Sportster S and its additional features. It's true, the Sportster S does have additional features, power and electronics aids. But he goes on to say, I greatly regret that decision today. I am tired of all the HD BS already. Sportster was broken with less than 900 miles on it. I traded an XD-Aval and miss it. That is the best American cruiser bike I've ever ridden, although it is a 2016 Ducati design. This new Scout lineup does make a lot of sense and might be my main option to replace the flawed Harley Davidson. Eric goes on to say, I will never buy a HD bike ever again in my life. Now, when Harley Davidson had teething issues with the Pan America, with their new Revolution engine design, also with the Sportster S, I just put it down, new models, all new bikes, you're going to have potentially teething issues. And I thought after a few years, a few models down the line, they would get all that sorted out. But I'm still seeing people reporting that they're having issues with the Sportster S and with the Pan America. Now, I'm personally not saying don't buy these bikes. All I'm saying is, for me personally, I wouldn't write the Sportster S off as an option for me. What I would do is really get into it and research just what's going on. What is the problem? Is it something as simple as a weak battery? Now, if that's the case, it's just a weak battery, that can be fixed. You can buy an aftermarket battery with superior cranking performance and better longevity, and that could be all that's required to make these bikes, reliable, if that's the issue. I don't know what the issue is. On the other hand, the Indian Scout is also an all-new model, really, when you think about it from Indians, a new engine design. It's based on the previous Scout, and I'm sure it's not too radically different. It's a new frame. It's a whole new setup. So potentially there could be teething issues with that Scout lineup as well. Again, I'm not saying don't buy either bike. I would highly recommend, if you're looking at the Scout, definitely look at the Sportster S as well. But do your research, try and find out what issues people are having, and go into it with your eyes open. All right, now, which bike would I buy? Well, I really like the Scout 101. I think it looks fantastic. I think it would be a more comfortable option for me, for sure. but I also really like the Sportster S. In particular, I think it would make a fantastic base for customising. If I had a Sportster S or got a Sportster S, I would probably turn it into a cafe racery sort of bike, I reckon. And I reckon it's a perfect platform, very much underappreciated for its customisability, I reckon, the Sportster S. So for me, both bikes are highly appealing, but I have to make a decision. So let's put it this way. I would go for the Scout 101 over the Sportster S if I wanted to buy a bike that was instantly more comfortable out of the gate. And my gut feeling is, I don't know, but my gut feeling is I would expect, from what I've seen, from what I've read, that the new Scout 101 would possibly be more trouble-free, more reliable. I'm not saying there won't be any issues or there's no potential chance of having any issues from this new model release, but my gut feeling is, my gut is saying it would probably be a safer bet for me. And on the other hand, I can see myself spending more money on the Sportster S to turn it into what I would really want. So based on that, yeah, I'm going to have to say today I would go for the Scout 101. There you go. Tomorrow I might change my mind though. All right, I'm going to call it quits on this video. I hope this has been useful and helped to shed some light on the two models and why you should still not rule out the Sportster S if you're considering the Scout 101. Thank you again, everyone, for watching today, and also thank you for your continued support. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. There's a lot of unique content going on there now, and I have free memberships, so it doesn't cost you anything to sign up and get hold of that free content. Thanks to my new free subscribers and current Patreon tier members. I really appreciate your support. Have a great day, everyone, and bye for now.